Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Podcast Accelerator, the thrice-weekly show that brings you podcast education, industry insights, and straight-talking reactions to podcasting news. I'm your host, Mark Asquith, that British podcast guy and CEO and co-founder here at Rebel Base Media, the podcast tech company that creates the Podcast Success Academy, podcast websites, Productivity, Rebel Base Studios, and Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host, where you can get your first month of podcast hosting for just $1 and transfer an existing podcast in completely for free. So go ahead and check it out now at Captivate.fm. Now, today on the show, I'm going to kind of continue a big week for podcasting following WWDC, Worldwide Developer Conference, where Apple announced a whole raft of podcasting changes, some bigger than others, but nonetheless, each one of them affecting podcasting in some way. And today, I'm going to discuss the new Apple Podcast categories and what you need to do right now as a podcast creator to get ready for that rollout. I'm going to dig into that in just one moment, but before I do that, let me give you a cheeky little reminder that, of course, AWeber, my wonderful friends and team over at AWeber, is still giving you 90 days completely for free to try their email marketing platform. Now, email marketing is vital to all podcasters because if you're not connecting with your audience on a one-to-one basis, how can you possibly build a relationship? And that is one of the biggest mistakes that so many podcasters make. They understand that they need to talk to their listeners, but they don't know how. And email marketing, for so many of us in podcasting, is simply vital. Okay, so please go and check AWeber out at markasquith.com/AWeber. Now, Apple this week has responded to the podcast community at large by vastly expanding the number of podcast categories available in a move that is set to help podcasters and listeners to enjoy a better experience. Now, this is rolling out in September, but what do you as a podcaster need to do right now? Well, honestly, in short, not that much. Luckily. So we're a few months away from September. We've got another quarter of the year to get through. But the scenario is that Apple, when they when they put things out at WWDC, we sometimes rush to want them. What they tend to do at DubDub is they will announce something, such as iOS 13, they've done it with iOS 12. They'll put the beta out very, very quickly so that geeky devs like us can download it, play with it, start to implement things, see how things will work, things will look. And then they roll it out to the general public, excuse me, in about September. And now this year is no different. WWDC this year is no different. Now, they announced a number of podcast-related things from the stage at the keynote on the last event, which was this week. What they didn't announce, however, were these new podcast categories. So we received an email yesterday. Every podcaster that is on Apple Podcast received an email talking about the 2019 announcements. And one of the big pieces of that puzzle were the Apple Podcast categories. And just to read this verbatim from Apple's email, Apple says, later this summer, we're adding top-level categories such as fiction, history, and true crime, as well as dozens of new subcategories. Here are some scenarios to help you to understand if you should consider updating your categories. New categories will be introducing some fiction, history, true crime categories, and a ton of new subcategories. For example, fiction, subcategory drama. Renamed categories. Some categories will be renamed. Sports and recreation, subcategory outdoor, is going to become sports, wilderness. All right? And then we're going to discontinue some subcategories. So, for example, sports and recreation will be, and the subcategory of professional will be displayed as sports until such time that you change that subcategory within your hosting provider. Now, it's a bit of a funny move, and I'm going to go through some of the new categories in a second. But what they've done is they then put in the email, you can make changes to your show's category now, and they'll go live in Apple Podcasts later this summer. Contact your hosting provider, such as Captivate.fm, for further support in implementing and updating the Apple Podcast categories within your RSS feed. Now, that is a little bit naughty because Apple didn't contact us as podcast hosts. Not one podcast host on planet Earth was contacted by Apple saying that this was going to happen. No one. So to send an email out saying, get in touch with Captivate or whoever you host with, it's a little bit naughty because it pushes us down the route of needing to respond to a lot of support tickets and having to scramble for the information. They have given us the second that they've given it to you. So it's a little bit of it's a naughty thing to do on Apple's part, sadly. I'm massively appreciative and I love the fact that they are responding and giving us new categories. However, it's a little bit naughty the way they've gone about it with the industry. But sadly, this is just Apple. Okay, this is what they do. So what that means is, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat today. Just getting over a little bit of a cold, so I do apologise. I'm sure a better podcaster than me would edit this, but you know me, I like to keep it real. Anyway, what this means is that at Captivate and any other podcast host, we're going to be implementing these new categories. Now, we'll be implementing these later this week. So by the end of the first week of June, Captivate will include and thus subsequently podcast websites, the managed WordPress platform, the integration with Captivate there will include the new podcast categories. Now, you can go ahead and change those categories if you so wish. And when Apple Podcasts rolls out in September on desktop to everyone, your new categories will appear. Now, you don't have to scramble to do this, okay? You don't need to worry about doing this instantly. We will be communicating this, much like I'm sure every other host will be communicating it. We'll be communicating this out to you very, very soon and kind of giving you a run-up to it during July, August, September, okay? So you don't need to scramble to do anything. We are implementing these new categories. That is all you need to know, okay, for now. Now, I'll put a link in the show notes to the Apple Podcast kind of help section where they go through all of the different new categories. So please go ahead and take a look at them. What you'll start to see, and there's a little bit of geeky stuff at the top that is all about RSS feeds. Don't worry, we've got that covered with Captivate, and you don't need to worry about that. Your podcast host will have that covered. But as you come further down, you'll start to see a list of the new categories. So we've got a lot more. We've got a couple more interesting business categories. In particular, we've got entrepreneurship, which I think is an interesting one. We've got a whole raft of comedy in there. We've got education courses, which is interesting. We've got a whole range of fiction categories, comedy fiction, drama, science fiction, which supports now the new kind of audio drama movement, which is going on in podcasting. History is a new one, which is fantastic for people like Dan Carlin. We've then got things like health, alternative health, fitness, mental health, nutrition, sexuality. It's a little disappointing to see the LGBTQ community not respected or represented quite enough as I'd like in that. I would very much like to see an LGBTQ subsection in there. Kids and families in there. We've got stories for kids, which is a new one. There's also leisure, automotive, which is one for my good friend, Mr. Cam Capriotto. So Cam, if you're listening, please, please, please dig in. In fact, I'm going to send him a Slack message as soon as I've recorded this. We've also got news, which has got daily news in there. We've got a subsection for music, which is very, very interesting, very, very interesting, because there's a lot more going on in podcasting around music right now, which is I think is fantastic. What else we got in there? Science gets an astronomy, earth sciences, chemistry, mathematics, physics, which interests me massively. I'm digging deep into quantum physics, quantum gravity, and general, the whole quantum mechanics side of science at the minute. So I'm well interested in that one. Society and culture, true crime, technology. There's a lot more in sports. One for Kieran is golf. We've got soccer, we've got football, and so on. And then TV and film is jumping on the after shows kind of bandwagon, where you get the recap shows, TV reviews, film history. So really what Apple Podcasts are doing with this is they're embracing so much of what the industry has done without it. So we've been doing recap shows in TV for a long time now. We've been doing audio dramas, science fiction dramas. We've just been doing all of this stuff. So basically this is Apple saying, look guys, we understand that you need to sort this a little bit more. In my opinion, the way that they've gone about it, it's a little bit naughty. I wish they'd spoken to the hosts just so that we were prepared for it. But it's Apple. Sometimes they do things like that. And I do wish, there were a couple more categories, especially things like LGBTQ representation in there, rather than bundling it with sexuality. I do think that would be a valid thing to look at. But this is a step in the right direction, so we've got to be grateful for that one. So please go and take a look at the link in the show notes. We'll kind of pop everything in there for you. And just dig in. Like I said, you don't need to worry right now. Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host, will support this from day one. So please check Captivate.fm out now if you want a proactive podcast host to help you with your show. And thank you so much for joining me here on the Podcast Accelerator as normal. Remember to tell all your podcasting friends that the show is available to listen to for free in any app that supports podcasts. And if you're wondering what the best next step to take for your own podcast is, whether you're a new or veteran podcaster, please go ahead and take our short 5-minute survey where I'm going to help you to diagnose and solve the main issue holding you and your show back. And I'm going to give you access to our free, vibrant Podcast Rebellion community, some free weekly group coaching from me and the team, actionable insider-only emails, and even a free invitation to the Podcast Success Academy. So please go ahead and invest 5 minutes now to grow your podcast by heading to rebelbasemedia.io/grow. And before I wrap, a huge thank you to Stephen Wilson, the Apple Podcast team, for doing what they do. A huge thanks to everyone in the industry that's responded to this. It's been great to be a part of this week. And until next time, do not forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.